All right, you guys. So today I'm really excited to do this podcast. This is someone who I have certainly looked up to in speckled trout fishing and just fishing in general. Ran into Gary. I think we met at ICAST in person the first few years ago. But Gary, how long have you been speckled trout fishing for?
Oh my, awful long time. Probably started speckled trout fishing pretty seriously back in the 1980s.
Wow. And let me give you the official introduction. This is Gary Dubiel of Spec Fever Guide Service. Gary is one of the top-rated inshore guides in the Neuse River. And, Gary, you do adult red drum, speckled trout, and you fish all year round in that region, right?
Yep, sure do.
Awesome. So really excited. So let's just get right to it. And the first thing that I wanted to kind of pick your brain on is the movement of speckled trout throughout the year. So can you just give us like maybe a 10,000-foot view, from like winter, spring, summer, fall maybe?
Yeah, sure. I'll kind of make it as simple as I possibly can, okay, and then we can get a little bit more technical with it. So, as a general rule of thumb, on the Neuse River, the colder it is. So, in the wintertime, the colder it is, the more the fish move up and in. So, in other words, up the river and in the creeks.
Gotcha.
As you progress into spring, late March, early April, the warmer that water gets, the more the fish move out and down. So out on the main river shorelines, yeah, and down towards the Sound. There is some migratory movement from the Neuse River into the Chesapeake Bay, and some exchange in and out of the oceanic population of fish. In other words, fish that may winter in the ocean come back into the river to spawn. Some of the fish that may winter over move out into the ocean or to the eastern part of the Pamlico Sound during the summer.
And that's really the interesting part with speckled trout. And I'm in the Chesapeake Bay. I fish your area a little bit, and it's kind of that, like, 'cause in the fall, I feel like in the fall and the spring, trout are relatively easy to locate because they're so plentiful and where we're normally fishing. But like, would I be wrong to say, is there two different kind of classes of speckled trout, like one that will, like one kind of class of speckled trout that does join that kind of oceanic migration, and another that some of them stay, inside all year?
I had participated in some DNA studies on speckled trout. What the final results on that are, but the question is, is there one population of fish, or are there two populations of fish? How do those fish mingle? How do they interact? So, tagging data definitely shows movement from the Pamlico Sound and the Neuse River up into the Chesapeake Bay. I've had tag returns from my personally tagged fish, from fish that I tagged for North Carolina, that were recaptured in Maryland in the Chesapeake Bay.
Wow.
And so you do have movement there. I caught a Virginia tag fish. It was a smaller fish, less than 14 inches, that was tagged in Hampton Roads, Virginia. This was in early November, several years back. I recaptured that fish in 14 days in Oriental, North Carolina. So it's not that just big fish move, small fish move, and they move pretty quickly. Tagging studies, the tagging studies that were done definitely show some movement of the fish when they leave the Neuse River, and that they move along the western side of the Sound and move out Oregon Inlet more often than they move out of Hatteras and Ocracoke. But in the return, you do definitely see return tag information coming in through Hatteras Inlet and Ocracoke Inlet as well. And so there is a significant volume of movement of these fish.
Yeah.
Which fish stay where and which fish don't, and how that population decides to do that remains pretty much a mystery, but there is a significant amount of movement for sure.
Absolutely. So to kind of simplify this again and get, like what you were saying, to get to the generalities of their behaviors. So what you're saying is, as that water temperature starts to move into, like right now it's November at the time of you and I having this discussion, and we're getting ready to move into that cooler, water temps. And so are you saying that a lot of these trout, they are going to be pushing further back in the creeks as that water temperature cools?
Yeah, as long as the dynamic that occurs here is pretty interesting. So your initial cold fronts like we're getting now will drop the water temperature in the creeks and the river. Eventually what will happen is that even if temperatures don't get excessively warm, the sunshine will get in the creeks and actually warm the creek temperatures up. And so the backs of the creeks that are soft mud, soft dark mud, have a tendency to warm up and hold the heat longer than the river does.
Right.
The river shorelines are primarily a more sandy, light-colored bottom, so is the sound, and so they have a tendency to cool off and stay cool. The bait is going to move up into those areas where the water's a little warmer, and subsequently so do the fish. You can have dynamics on a warmer winter where you don't have all the fish move up in the creeks if the river never gets very cold. And so,
Gotcha.
it is water temperature oriented. You will also see fish work their way up the Neuse River, and so you can have significant populations of speckled trout that will move into the New Bern area and actually up the Neuse and up the Trent River on cooler winters. So the fish don't have an issue with getting in areas of low salinity as long as the water temperatures remain a little warmer.
So it's almost, because that's one of the themes that I am talking about throughout this course, is fish motivated by, feeding, spawning, and comfort. And in terms of speckled trout, what you're saying is, in terms of comfort, that water temperature is almost paramount, for them sacrificing the salinity to some extent.
Absolutely. And, I kind of throw with that, and this is a philosophy that I like to look at. So fish do not have an address. They don't have calendars, and they don't have watches.
I love it.
Right. And so at no point are those fish going to just randomly show up somewhere because, tomorrow's November 30th.
Absolutely.
Right? If the water temperature and the food availability is good, they're going to find it, and that's where they'll be. So
absolutely,
every year can be a little bit different when things cool down, how fast they cool down, if they stay cold for very long. And so those fish will adjust where they need to be to do that. So, pinpointing your fish, like I said, if you use a general rule of thumb that, the fish are going to go up and in, the colder it is. If it never gets really cold, don't expect them to get too far back.
Absolutely. So spring through summer and fall, just to recap on that real quick, are those fish are kind of pushing back in from the oceanic migration. Some are coming back in through Oregon Inlet. And is that kind of what springtime looks like, you're saying?
So in springtime, what you're going to see is the creeks are going to warm up. And you get into late March, early April, and you'll see the creeks reach a low 70-degree temperature mark. Your fish are going to have a tendency to all want to pile out of those creeks and move out into the main river.
Gotcha.
Now, some of those fish will continue to push through the sound and go up into the Chesapeake Bay, and so there's your May and June, July fish for the Chesapeake Bay.
Yep.
Right? These are the fish that have wintered over here, and they're coming that direction.
Right.
Some of the fish that have been in the ocean in the winter will move in the estuary to spawn.
Yeah.
And so some of the fish that have wintered over the creeks will remain in the estuary to spawn, but all your spawning is going to take place in the main river or in the sound, depending on the salinity.
Yeah.
And you're usually going to see that spawn occur around the first full moon in late May or early June.
How does that affect, I mean, I'm sure that's a dumb question. When you are out with clients targeting these trout during the spawn, what does that look like? Is there anything different that you're doing?
Well, speckled trout, they're a drum, so you're not is most saltwater fish, and particularly drums, they're not nesting.
Right.
There's no prolonged spawning period.
Right.
And so they're going to typically spawn around a moon phase, usually the full moon, and that occurs at night. And after that spawning activity occurs, those fish will move into areas to fish. For me to adjust with anglers, I'm going to fish out on the main river shorelines from Oriental downstream out into the Sound, because that's where the salinity is higher, and that's where spawning occurs, and that's where those fish have a tendency to be closer to those shoreline areas. June is some of the best speckled sea trout fishing that I have, just because you have large volumes of fish that are still schooled up, and the water temperature is warm and they're aggressive, and so just adjusting locations, whether you're around the full moon or not, is gonna put fish in the boat.
Absolutely.